Janie Bryant, you're the costume designer for 1883, a prequel to Yellowstone that tells the story of the Dutton family ancestors during the 19th century. You actually previously won an Emmy for another Western, Deadwood, and it was actually set pretty close to the same time period as this series. How are the needs of this show similar and different from Deadwood?
Well, 1883, and thank you so much for having me here. Let me just start by saying that this is exciting to talk about costume design. So I'm so happy to be here. Um, 1883 is kind of in the same period. Deadwood was set in 1876. Very different set of circumstances in terms of the script. And 1883 is a little bit later, and the journey with these characters is very different. Kind of what is the same is I'm glad that I had the experience of so much distressing with Deadwood because it really did help in terms of uh, understanding how distressing works with 1883. So I was happy to have that experience. Um, but just in terms of designing 1883, it was really interesting. I learned so much about so many different cultures, because the immigrants were a big part of the story of 1883 and their journey, and their costumes were really on that journey with each person too. And we really see that in terms of the costume design with all the characters, including the Dutton family. Elsa, her character has a whole journey with her um, traveling dress going into a whole different life of its own. So when I was designing that costume, I was thinking about, okay, how can this costume make all of these different transformations? And so I love the idea of her having a two-piece garment, which was, very indicative of the 1880s. And also the style of her garment really was important to be able to morph and transform into different aspects of what the script was calling for. And also I loved the idea of designing a skirt for her that she was going to be able to ride horses into. Because let's just say Elsa does not, ride side saddle. She, straddles the horse. So she had to have a skirt in which could really accommodate those needs. So, a lot of the costume design was about so much of what the action was going to be for all the different characters.
Yeah, and speaking of action, when you're telling the story like this that has a lot of action and activity, and the characters, traveling, do you need a lot of duplicates? Is there like what are the complexities? Do you need to have the clothes accommodate for like comfortable stunt work, and what are those considerations?
Yeah, so we had multiples on every single principal cast and day player for gunshots, for fighting. We have to have lots of multiples just for, like Elsa's costume, perfect example. I think we made probably 9 of those costumes. Her blue dress, her blue traveling dress. Um, and then even like her white dress, the one that she gets shot with an arrow, uh, we had 6 of those costumes to accommodate for the arrow and the special effects and the stunts. And then I also made, I had my team make a lot of the um, underdress for the pantaloons. I made them so they were actually pants and just added the ruffle trim on the bottom so they could ride the horses, which was very effective. And then also the ladies and my male actors too. We bought them a lot of equestrian pants with the padding in them so that they would be more comfortable in riding horses all day. Because it wasn't like, oh, we have a quick scene just on a horse. I mean, once they got dressed in their costume, they were out for the whole entire day on that horse in, those period correct saddles, which are really uncomfortable. So we had to make all sorts of accommodations for just their daily work and being able to work and ride on the horses too. And not only accommodate for the action of, fighting, stunt doubles. We had a huge team of stuntmen, stunt women, um, that all had to be doubled as well. And we had the whole group of actors and background actors that were on the wagon trail, and they all had to be multiplied as well. Well, I guess my average was about 8 costumes for each actor in terms of multiples, not accounting for if they had changes to their costume. So it was a huge endeavor for sure.
And not just dealing with the period accuracy and the action that takes place. You're also trying to convey character with the wardrobe. What was it like working with Taylor Sheridan, the creator, and just each of the actors to kind of build these characters and who they were and showcase that to the audience through the wardrobe?
Well, Taylor, it was great working with Taylor. I really appreciate that he has a strong sense of color, and he has a very strong sense of character as well. I mean, I would always tell him, Taylor, you would make a great costume designer because he really would. He has a great vision. So, like when I would talk to him in the beginning about Elsa, he had this idea of like, oh, I just really see Elsa in light blue because light blue is so optimistic and it's hopeful. And so he really loved the color of Elsa being in blue and also yellow. Like those were her two colors for her character. And so I had sent him this swatch of fabric that ultimately became the traveling dress. And it was a swatch of fabric that um, I found that was light blue and navy blue. It had like a few different tones of blue in the fabric, and he loved it. And I actually ended up using the back side of that fabric as well. Um, just because it was like more textural, and I loved the back side of the fabric better than the front side. So he really responded to that colorway for Elsa. So that was really, a great collaboration. Um, and also, because her hair was blonde, so he loved the idea that like the blues and the yellows were just Elsa's character. I mean, for me, like I always thought of the light blue as like airy and just very optimistic. Like Elsa had like this very optimistic adventurous spirit, so like all the different tones of blues really went into illustrating her character visually. um and then that's why I also designed the leggings for her in the yellow, which was indicative of the Native Americans and the Comanche tribe at that time period too. And of course, I loved working with Faith. She's such a firecracker. I would actually always call her firecracker, and she always called me Tabasco. So we had a great working relationship and just a lot of fun together. Um, and I love designing her traveling costume as well because she really is that feminine force and maternal force within the family. And I love the idea of designing her initial costume in like this very muted rose and pink um, colors for that feminine strength and her maternal protective nature that she had for the entire family. And then, like, as the trip moved forward and the further they got away from home, her color palette became darker and darker and darker. Um, and Taylor actually loved that idea of her becoming darker. So I think that, you know, visually you can really see Margaret's story as well. And for James Dutton, who is played by Tim McGraw, Tim is uh, great as well. I mean, there's so, I mean, I'm Southern and there were so many Southerners on that show, and it was really fun. It felt like home, and I loved all the actors. And Tim, he and I had a lot of conversations about his hat because, you know, in a Western, the hat makes the man. I mean, I had a lot of conversations with Sam Elliott too. Um, and I love that, you know, hats really portray the character in a Western, because that's, you know, really what you see. And it describes so much about one's character. So for Tim, you know, we talked a lot about, since he was a farmer, since he came from Tennessee, he wasn't a cowboy. You know, he had like, I love the idea of him being visually a little bit more of an outsider in his design. So he does not have the, you know, he doesn't really have like the fringe chaps or like a huge brimmed hat like a cowboy would during that period. You know, his hat is a little more lower profile. It's more of like a slouch style hat, of which is very indicative of the 1880s, and it has more of an Eastern look and not a
Mm.
Western cowboy look. And also I loved his palette, like just being very super masculine with like these very dark browns, like really dark browns, uh, burgundies, tans. I love the idea of his color palette being very earthy, very grounded. So we really see his color palette in those colors like throughout the series.
And it really comes through in the design and throughout the whole series. And thank you so much for talking with us about it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.